No, Raw had a comatose 3 hour boring 2019 feel to it for most of the evening on Monday night. And then we got to our main event, which you could tell by the time they went to it that they were going to give this thing its time. Now, everybody had a lot of different expectations for Punk versus Braun. This whole thing has been a referendum on both guys, where they stand, where we're going to be going forward, a referendum on Triple H's booking, the main event scene. Is Bron Breakker ready? Does CM Punk still have it? All of those things were discussed, and there was a lot going on. And then there was a lot of debate about what the outcome of this match should be. Is there going to be a big interference spot that leads to the next angles going into WrestleMania? Is this the time on the first show of the year, on the anniversary on Netflix, the Stranger Things crossover, all those big things? Was this the time to put the belt on Bron Breakker? A lot of people had that as an argument. And it's a little bit difficult because we have another title match, a major title match, 3 Stages of Hell, a little bit later in the week. So you have to balance all of these booking considerations when making these predictions. I don't know, though, if anyone quite expected what we got. Everyone had expectations of Punk and Breakker. Nobody quite expected this. I don't think anybody expected a damn near half-hour match, which would have plenty of run-ins and shenanigans and everything you expect for the modern WWE main event, but also had the babyface winning clean. I didn't have that happening. No way I had that happening. And so I'll admit it too. I kind of got sucked into this. I did. I got sucked in since the beginning, since the intros. Since CM Punk came out there in that Steiner Brother inspired jacket, I thought that was great. Wearing the gym shirt prior to that to complete the trolling cycle. I thought that was great. I thought the way that Cole and Graves were framing it early on as a big fight, I thought the video packages were really good. And then I kind of got sucked into the match once it got going. Had a very, very slow start. Most matches that I consider good tend to have very slow starts, and I think that just overall helps with the pacing. But I got sucked in. We had this match on Monday, 3 Stages of Hell on Friday, and Gunther and AJ next week. If you ask me, WWE can't book a pay-per-view this month in terms of singles matches because they're booking the Royal Rumble, which will have 2 massive Rumble matches. It's not like they have a ton of singles matches on pay-per-views anyway. But it seems as if they have nothing else to do with these people, and all they can ever know how to do is build 3 to 4 week-long feuds that culminate in a big match. Now, obviously, Cody and Drew, they've been feuding for like a decade. Punk and Braun is fairly new. AJ and Gunther, fairly new. So we're getting TV programs with pay-per-view style payoffs. And like I said, they had me on this one. Wasn't a totally clean finish, but it was an absolute definitive finish. Definitive meaning there is no controversy from a kayfabe standpoint related to CM Punk's victory. If anything, this was not an idea of the babyface who slipped out of there with the victory, who overcame all this cheating and did his thing opportunistic. No. He overcame it all. He overcame all these odds, did Punk, but it was definitive in the end. Like, if you watch that and you don't know anything about the work nature and all the stuff that is going on, you would say that the little 48-year-old guy is a better wrestler than the big, beefy Bron Breakker. How's that for your alliteration? So we have to deal with that result. And I think we have that result for one simple reason. From a kayfabe perspective, one thing now is very, very clear. The vision freaking sucks. What is the point of the vision at this point? I'm being a little cheeky, but I'm being a little serious with that. In kayfabe, why would anybody want to be with the vision? To recap, once helping Seth Rollins obtain the title over a cash-in, on CM Punk. So you have the guy whose title has been delivered to him. They then turn on him after he successfully defends that title. They turn on him. Their boss, Paul Heyman, doesn't even get any of the guys into the Battle Royal to determine the next champ. So they have great management from a kayfabe perspective. And then they go into Survivor Series, and they're supposed to be this big unified unit over here. And what happens? Now, I had that wrong. I actually had them losing the War Games match because all I can remember is the post game, but I looked it up. Yeah, they won the War Games. So, hey, they won War Games. They were in good position. They got someone a title shot. All right, you got Bron Breakker a title shot. And despite having the man advantage, despite being the evil heel group, despite having the mastermind and Paul Heyman, CM Punk and a few luchadors were able to hold off all of these guys. This might be part of a bigger story that they're telling with Bron Breakker, and certainly probably is part of a bigger story that they're telling with Seth Rollins. But as things stand right now in early January of 2026, this is a completely useless group that should have no credibility anywhere. You never know. When people change and move groups, there's always considerations. And these groups can kind of ebb and flow. The group may start out great, end up horribly. The group may start out horribly and end up great. I'm seeing this, though, right now, considering the injury that had happened and everything else around the booking. This is not looking like Rhea Dom era Judgment Day. This is looking like Finn Dom, like Raquel Carlito era Judgment Day. Nobody wants that for your faction. Nobody wants to be living in the good old glory days. When it comes to the vision, though, there's not even any good old glory days. Like, what was the glory day? The Survivor Series win that I kind of couldn't remember earlier? Was that what it is? Paul Heyman has to be the fall guy. He has to be, right? It's all him. This organization did really, really well when it was just Punk and Heyman. They start expanding, you start bringing in these outsiders, just dilutes everything. I guess Matt Morgan and Nathan Jones and Ryback and Curtis Axel and Heidenreich haven't taught anyone any lessons. But that wasn't the only story coming out of it. There's a little more meta story that I thought was pretty interesting. That's from the kayfabe perspective and the usefulness of the vision. Maybe, just maybe, in small doses, CM Punk still has it. Now, I don't know if CM Punk ever really lost it, to be honest with you. He's just felt so mid for about 6 months. The character's been uninteresting. The promos have been repetitive. The matches have been all right. His match with Gunther at SummerSlam was amazing. So, yeah, we've got Nash telling Punk he's got to get in better shape. We have Punk trolling Nash at live events. We have Nash responding in kind. There's all of that going on just with that. Then you've got the actual perception of CM Punk, which has never been the best coming out of AEW. I think it was rehabbed a little bit in early 2024 by AEW airing the footage and all of that and Tony Khan's media campaign around then. I think Punk's overall worth started to get raised throughout 2024 in WWE. And he was injured for part of the year, so that kind of put a little bit of mystique to him and the Drew feud. 2025 was almost the inverse. Post-WrestleMania, there's been this sort of fatigue with Punk. There's been this realization of his age. And there's been a lot of shaming of Punk from his hypocrisy, from things he said in the past. It's been a rough year for Punk. Punk needs, let's be honest, Punk needs a year of good PR. I don't think Punk's any different now than he used to be necessarily. If you don't like him now, maybe you don't like the person who's always been that way. You're just seeing a different side of him. That's for you to decide. Regardless, when you think about it, outside of the stuff with AEW, and again, I'll say this till the cows come home, he absolutely deserved to get fired from AEW. I don't think any reasonable person would argue otherwise. With that said, there became a time where we're associating Punk with the most irreconcilable people in pro wrestling. And I don't know that we necessarily have evidence to the case of that. And then you have him just being this old kind of corporate guy the last year. And that hasn't been the funnest thing in the world. CM Punk needs a year where all we're talking about is his promos, where all we're talking about is his matches, where all we're talking about is his storylines. He needs a year of good PR. This was a hell of a way to start it, to prove that you are the guy working with the young guy who's never really had the major match. This was a big, big spot for him, and he delivered. Now, how much are they going to continue to rely on Punk going forward remains to be seen. The guy is almost 50 years old, which puts him right about the middle of the main event scene, but he's still that age. And how much further are you going to go with him? Is he supposed to be the guy to just put everyone over? I talked about it a couple weeks ago. It was kind of his job to make Bron in this feud. And I think he did a very, very good job with that. I don't think Bron's a made guy by any stretch, but I think Punk did everything he could to put him over and still provide entertainment. Like, he wouldn't bend the knee, but he also didn't bury him in any of the promos. And the promos were pretty heated. The one thing I will say Punk has got to work on, and maybe this was just a safety issue, but did you guys see, and it's a little fuzzy here, did you guys see this pile driver? Shout out to the announce team. Very, very much shout out to the announce team for proclaiming that CM Punk did not get all of this pile driver. I don't know if pile drivers are still banned. I knew they were in 2013 when Punk and Cena did that in their Raw match. I think pile drivers either need to be banned for Punk because they look so bad, or Punk should be the only guy that gives a pile driver because that might be the safest pile driver ever. Now, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but Bron Breakker really likes landing on his neck. He does it quite often. So I get it. Punk is trying to not have like the third incident associated with Punk and Punk and Bron and neck injuries. So I'm glad he protected him. But holy hell, if that's how you got to do this move, then maybe we don't need to be doing this move at all. Maybe the pile driver can go back to being banned, or where it possibly, probably, ultimately belongs. But for at least one night, CM Punk said he still got it. Now, the other element of last night, which I think is very relevant today, and the main reason why people have interest in the outcome last night, was what does this mean for Bron Breakker? Regardless of the outcome and everything that was going on last night, no matter what happened with CM Punk, he would have ultimately been okayed. He's a made guy. Bron Breakker, while coming across like a chosen one and having many tools that would justify that proclamation, is not. He's still a little bit green, if you will. Still a little inexperienced. We saw a couple months ago when he was going back and forth with Roman Reigns, it didn't quite fit. He didn't quite look like the main eventer that he always looks like. All of a sudden, he's contrasting with other main eventers, and maybe he couldn't exactly swim in that pool, or at least that was the perception. He takes the loss here. He takes a relatively clean loss. If anything, he had all the heelish advantage in this match, and he didn't get it done. In kayfabe, as I said, he is not as good of a wrestler as CM Punk. That kind of blows all of our minds, but it just kind of is what it is. And I don't think that what happened last night was a career death blow. Traditionally, you don't like to see the guy that is on the rise, and not initially on the rise. This isn't like John Cena taking on Brock Lesnar at Backlash in 2003, which was, what did we figure out a couple weeks ago? John Cena's like third ever singles pay-per-view opponent. Bron Breakker isn't at that stage. When you're at that stage, simply showing up in the main event may be good enough. But people who have a little more main event, like untouchable potential, tend to be kept away from there until they're ready to go with them and they're ready to fire off. The example that people like to give, and I think it really makes sense. What if Austin doesn't beat Michaels at WrestleMania 14? Does any part of the Attitude Era even make sense if that happens? Does Austin remain as over as he does? No. All of those things are the case. A little bit different with Bron because he happens to be a heel. But regardless, this was sort of being built and at least built up in discourse away from the show as the moment for Bron Breakker. And when you don't get it done in your moment, I feel like there's a little bit of a stigma that might stick to you. My main takeaway here is that Triple H and the WWE creative team, they need to be very careful here. I honestly think between now and WrestleMania, the future of Bron Breakker as a top-tier main event talent may be in the balance. Now, it's not to say that last night's result was a death knell, but it just means that they're going to have to proceed with caution and care. Triple H likes to pride himself on the stories he tells, the long term stories that he likes to tell. Usually WrestleMania to WrestleMania. Hell, the champions are rarely allowed to even lose or drop the titles in between those two dates. Kind of a big issue with the overall promotion, but we'll talk about that on another day. So I have no doubt that there is a big story that's being planned here. I shouldn't say I have no doubt. I have some doubts. I'll get to that in a minute. But in the course of all that storytelling, in the course of what's going to be a pretty packed WrestleMania season, they need to be aware to not lose Bron Breakker in the shuffle of things. Now, again, I have no doubt that he will have a prominent match at WrestleMania. You may even argue this now makes him a big favorite for the Saudi Rumble. I would think that's a pretty safe bet, although there's tons of candidates and no one candidate has really emerged, and we haven't even really got to declaration season just yet. I'm sure in the next week or two, we're going to be knee deep in declaring our intentions to enter the Royal Rumble, the Saudi Rumble. Not the greatest Royal Rumble. We already had that one in Saudi Arabia. This is just like a goodest Royal Rumble. Everything going on in WWE in these next couple of months, they do run a risk, though, of Bron Breakker being a little bit lost in the shuffle. Even if he's in a prominent spot, he's gonna be crowded out if he's not one of the like 2-night main events. Which, at this point, I don't see him as that, but it's a possibility. It definitely could happen. And how is that presented? He's already feuding for the secondary championship, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that's hurt Gunther one bit for laying a lot of claim to that title. And I don't think that Jey Uso brought down the title so much that it has that level of dissipation from the main title. If anything, I think in the last year, the two titles have become closer because Cody and Cena, believe it or not, were not seen as untouchable as much as Roman Reigns was. And even though this year has Seth Rollins holding this title and having an injury, we are far enough away from the Seth Rollins being permanently injured while holding this title and claiming this to be the workhorse wrestle every night title. So at least we're beyond that. With that said, these aren't the most ideal circumstances for Bron Breakker. I also question, from a kayfabe perspective, his character alignment. Are they trying to make him a big babyface going into WrestleMania? If so, who's his opponent? Are you gonna do Brock Lesnar? Are you gonna do Gunther? Are you gonna do someone connected to the vision that he ends up turning on? Because at this point, he's got like the cheaters who don't help him. He's got Heyman who kept him out of a match earlier. Like he has no reason to be happy with the vision at all. And they have been telling a little bit of that story. So I'm sure we're gonna get some follow-up to that. I'm sure we are. Although, and I hate that I have to say this, I think we might be in an era where, like, we can't assume that there's a plan for every big thing. Now, famously in the Vince era, plans would change, stuff would be short-sighted, stuff like all of these criticisms we have now of current WWE creative. We had a lot of those criticisms throughout the Vince era. So again, and I shouldn't have to say this, being critical of Triple H does not imply I want Vince to come back. Okay? Have we cleared that up? Thank you. All right. Now, with that said, We are coming off of a year where you had potentially the biggest wrestling storyline of all time that they did not have a plan for. You had the once in a generation chance to turn your ultimate babyface of 20 years heel. And you did it for the moment. You did it to sell some tickets in Canada. You did it to pop a Rock appearance. That's what you did it for. You didn't have a solid plan. And by the looks of it, you never really came up with one. Hell, even the back half of that run didn't really seem like it had a real plan. They were just booking it on the fly. They cannot do that with Bron Breakker. They need to have all the care in the world put into this. He can't just be the awesome badass and he'll just live off that aura. No, there needs to be a plan, care taken, opponent taken. He's not Drew McIntyre. So right now, Drew McIntyre hardly ever wins matches despite being at the top of the card. That can't be the case with Bron Breakker. The die is not yet cast with Breakker, and we don't want him to be like a main event loser either. So they have to be really careful of how they frame him going forward. And again, given recent events, I don't know if they necessarily have a plan. Hope they do. Believe that they do, but I can't say it for sure.